Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 73 of the Whitey and Will Sports Show. Today is Sunday, May 7th, and we haven't recorded a show in a while, and we actually do not have half of that Whitey and Will, so we don't have the back half of it. Mike is not able to record with us today. I won't really get into the specifics of it other than I think we mentioned in our last show that Mike was dealing with some health stuff that just kind of kept him out of commission for a while. And about the time he started getting over that, well, then his wife, Ann, kind of ran into a few things. And so it's just made it hard for him for those health reasons to be able to record. But he was really wanting to get something recorded to talk about the baseball and softball postseasons that are coming up. And well, we figured we've got a friend of the show, probably at this point, our most frequent guest, as a matter of fact, who, has generally some pretty intelligent things to say about baseball in the area. So Matt Robinson is calling in. Matt, let everybody hear your beautiful voice.
Well, thanks, Dustin. It's a pleasure to join you. Didn't realize I was one of the most frequent flyers. I guess I hadn't thought about it, so to speak.
I'm thinking that you are probably, this is what maybe the third time we've had you in on this in one way or another, third or fourth.
I think it's number 3. Yeah, I do think it's number 3. So,
yeah. But not necessarily from the broadcasting part of things, since watching your son's games and being out in the field has kept you busy, but you have seen a lot of baseball this spring because of your son Mason's Altamont team. You've been keeping up with them, so you've seen a lot of the teams in the area here and there. So we figure you've got as good an idea as anybody to talk intelligently about some of the regional matchups. So here you are.
Well, thanks for letting me join in. And, it doesn't take a lot to speak intelligently about our area, because all you really have to say is it's really, really good.
The baseball scene continues to be ridiculous. It's been that way for a while now locally. And really, going no further than the Altamont team and the regional they ended up in, and really just that entire sectional that they're in, that kind of speaks to it. Altamont, we can start there as far as I'm concerned, because that's one particular interest to our area. You've got in that Brownstown regional, you've got a St. Anthony team from Effingham that's the number 1 seed, and then Altamont's the 4 seed. But the number 2 seed in that regional, of course, the second seeded team in that regional. Altamont is a good and talented team, but it's going to take a ton of work just to escape a regional like that because of how good St. Anthony is, and also the fact that playing a Brownstown team in the first game of that for Altamont's not going to be easy either. So we can start there. Just say what you got to say about that.
Well, that regional will open up on Monday with Beecher City taking on Ramsey. And the winner of that game, of course, then moves on to take on St. Anthony on Wednesday night at 4:30. And Altamont and Brownstown play Thursday at 4:30. So, I'm not going to be able to really handicap that Beecher City-Ramsey game other than to say that Beecher City, not that bad a team. Come in, they're just a tick under 500, and obviously they're playing a pretty tough schedule with the other area teams. So, but they're going to get St. Anthony. The winner of that game is going to get St. Anthony, and that, like you say, will be a huge order for them. And then Altamont Brownstown, that Brownstown St. Elmo co-op has given Altamont fits throughout the year. They knocked them out of a regional, I believe it was last year. And, so Altamont shouldn't take them lightly. Even though Altamont's around 18-7, BSE is something like 11-9. They've played already. Altamont handled them. They're actually scheduled to play again on Tuesday, as a matter of fact, which is kind of interesting since they'll play each other basically a week later.
Yeah.
And so, neither team will probably show all their cards in that one, but at the same time, it'll kind of let each coach know a little bit more about the other team as well. But yeah, you have to think St. Anthony's going to get to that championship game, And, Brownstown, St. Elmo can definitely put the thing about the entire sectional complex, I guess that I would say, is there's 4 or 5 teams that could come out of that thing.
Absolutely.
And then there's another 5 or 6 teams that can beat anybody on any given day. And because they've got a talented enough pitcher or whatever that they could knock off one of the top seeds in a semifinal game. So, boy, and it's no different than we've seen the last couple of years. Whoever makes it out of that sectional wins state. And it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, and I guess I should preface, I didn't clarify that, of course, this isn't next week, but the week after that these are all
right
taking place. There's still, as you mentioned, still some regular season baseball left to play. But yeah, I think that's a really fair point. Like, there are, you look at the other regionals. There's the Brownstown regional. The winner of that will be playing the winner of the Neoga regional. Then you've got Tuscola and South Central hosting as well, feeding into that Altamont sectional. And there really are teams here, a number of teams that you stick them in another part of the state. And I think I probably said this on the air at some point during a baseball broadcast, that, those, you put them in another part of the state and they walk to a sectional championship. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's no offense to anybody. It's just how it is here.
Yeah, I was trying to point out to some folks the other day just how, they're looking around saying, well, Altamont's 18-7, North Clay's 18-8, South Central's 19-6, and these are all approximate. I'm not sure that this is the exact record, but it gives you an idea. Sure. And then St. Anthony's 21-3. Yeah. Don't forget about Windsor's Two Straws, somewhere around 16-5. And you can't lose track of the fact that they are beating up on each other.
I was going to say most of those losses probably are handed to each other by each other, right?
And then the second part of it is teams from outside of the area and outside of what is the NTC conference are more willing to schedule these 1A teams for, North Clay has ramped up their schedule. South Central, for example, just beat Father McGivney in a 4-2 ball game. Father McGivney was undefeated out of 2A coming into that contest, and Aiden Dodson threw a great game and defeated them. St. Anthony, my gosh, their schedule is a challenge.
Sure.
Altamont, they stepped up and their schedule a little bit more by getting into a tournament in Beardstown, where they defeated Beardstown and Hamilton, West Hancock County, Hamilton, I believe it is, and then fell to Quincy Notre Dame in the championship game, but was competitive. Lost, I think, 10-5, but they had runners on in every inning and that sort of thing. So it's just a case where, again, whoever advances out of this, there's a legitimately 4 or 5 teams in this area that could win state, but they have to get out of their regional first.
Yeah, and that's the thing that Altamont's up against is as talented as they are, as games they've won this spring. I mean, there's St. Anthony, and St. Anthony, scoring like 10 runs a game. But I don't think they've obviously played each other already, and it was everybody's ball game. And so you just got to think about that if you're the underdog team there, and if Altamont does get to that championship game and they do face St. Anthony, they know, like, hey, we took them down the wire. They had to beat us in the last inning.
And Altamont and St. Anthony do tend to find each other come postseason, whether it's the fall NTC tournament. They've played each other in the championship game 3 out of the last 4 years, and then they played each other in the third place game the 1 year that they missed in the fall NTC championship tournament games. And they've met each other in regionals before too. And again, not discounting anybody's chances to rock the boat there. namely Brownstown, St. Elmo, or Beecher City, or Ramsey.
Sure.
But odds are, and especially on the St. Anthony side, I mean, you have to be so impressed with what St. Anthony has done. 21-3, something like that on the season.
Yep.
And they pitch well, but to me, their biggest strength is their offense. And, there's not a hole in the lineup 1 through 9.
No.
And they just make contact all day long. I mean, if you get a strikeout against St. Anthony, that's an accomplishment. We've seen them go games without striking out. We've seen them go against good pitching and only maybe have a couple of strikeouts in a game. And that constant pressure on the defense that they put on you is always there, and it's always tough on the pitcher too.
Well, and that's the high school game in a nutshell, right? Like, to be able to make the defense make plays. You have a pitcher go out there and strike out 7, 8, 9 kids. That really limits the number of times that 1 or 2 weak spots defensively might cost you a game. Well, St. Anthony puts, like you said, they make you make the plays, and that's not every. Most teams will have a place here and there that you can go for an out, right? Like, you can, there's a place in the lineup where you can kind of, if there's a rally going, you can get to that spot in the lineup and you can at least get out of it. Not so with St. Anthony. I mean, to me, it's exemplified by, as much as anything, is by having the Haney kid, the first baseman, batting 8th all season long. I mean, that's a good hitter, and he's batting 8th for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they've mixed in the younger kids. They've really brought them along nicely with some veterans like Eli Levitt, Will Haney, as you mentioned. Repke behind the plate. I was so impressed with Mandela as a catcher over the years for St. Anthony. And Connor Repke has really stepped into that role, both defensively and offensively, providing some punch. So, I mean, their depth is what really, I mean, they're really good. They're 21-3 or whatever they are against a very good schedule that they've put together. But you talk about, putting pressure on defenses and stuff and incorporating your youth. I think you have to look at North Clay City Co-op there in the South Central Regional and say the same thing about them. You talk about a team that's really transformed over the last year because of the loss of all of those seniors off of their state championship team. But all these younger kids have really stepped up and realized that they can play at this level, and you got to give Coach Freck a lot of credit for what he does and how he's been able to get those kids to play.
Yeah, I mean, so they're playing. South Central's got a regional, and North Clay actually pulled a 2 seed on their side of the sectional, and South Central got the 3. So North Clay is the high seed there. I think that's kind of probably a coin toss situation. I don't know exactly how the voting went, but I'm sure that probably
it had to be close.
Yeah.
But North Clay has actually beat South Central 2 out of 3 times this season, right?
Yeah, they handed South Central their first loss. I think South Central was like 13-0 at that point, maybe, and North Clay beat them. But yeah, I mean, listen, North Clay, like you already mentioned, lost 8 out of 9 starters from the state championship team. I saw them in the fall a little bit, and they didn't look lost or anything. Like, they didn't look terrible. It wasn't a train wreck. You could tell that the bones were there for them to be solid again in the future. But I don't know that I would have said there's a team that is going to be the, by whatever margin, by seeding anyway, the favorite in their regional. I would not have picked them for that. And here they are.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I mean, I will caveat that with the statement of, mainly because I knew how good the area would be, but you saw it even towards the end of the fall where they got into that NTC tournament and finished in the 3rd place game. And from the beginning of the fall to the end of the fall, you kind of saw how those players who didn't have a lot of experience, whether they were freshmen or maybe juniors, that because they were just blocked by the talented seniors that were above them, was able to, learn and grow and get better. And you could see they were coming. Am I going to say I thought that they would be this good this fast? I don't know that I can honestly say it, but I knew that they would be right there knocking on the door in that top 4 or 5 in the area. And they've done it. And, you start with Logan Fleener and you look at what he can do wherever he plays athletically, baseball, basketball, whatever.
Absolutely.
And, it kind of, his leadership out of that spot has to help. But again, you look at South Central, they still got teams that they still got members on their team that played and was in that state championship game. They know what that's all about too. So you talk about a ton of experience, even though both of those teams lost a lot, in the last year or two from their state championship runs, here's the last 2 state champions possibly meeting in that regional championship at South Central on Saturday. Of course, I don't honestly know much about Bridgeport Red Hill. Can't speak intelligently there.
No.
I know Dietrich's had an injury-plagued season. They play Sisney to get to North Clay. It'll be a tall order for Dietrich, but if you tell me Dietrich upsets North Clay, even though I've said so much about North Clay and how impressed I am with them, I can't be shocked either, because they have the ability to throw a pitcher out there and to play a little defense and win that game too.
Yeah. I think, just to touch on North Clay and South Central a little more, I think what they've got going for them, I mean, obviously coaching and strength of your program,
right.
And those things run hand in hand, actually. I mean, you don't have that kind of year in and year out quality program without a consistent quality coaching presence. But it's kind of a chicken or egg thing, I guess. But boy, both of those, you just don't count them out, because that they're going to be taught to play the right way. There's that next group always coming. They're being taught the right way at the lower levels, and they know what's expected of them when they get up to high school. And then you got coaches who know exactly what to do with them, how to get the best out of them. And yeah, I mean, especially with North Clay, it's just a lot of younger players or first year, varsity starters that just got put in the right positions to succeed and blossom. And here they are. And Kurt Jones, does the same thing at South Central. Just a fantastic coach. It's hard for me to picture what South Central baseball would ever be without him. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Whenever he does decide to retire or whatever, that'll be a huge hole to fill. But like you say, that's the same for North Clay with Coach Freck. Alan Witt has been at Altamont for a long time. Tony Craig's been at St. Anthony for a long time. But you look at some of the younger coaches in the area too. I mean, Harmeyer at Windsor Stew Straws is building a strong program, and obviously he's got the pedigree from that coming out of the South Central program. You look at Colton Boer, coaching Dietrich. I mean, these guys are young, they're hungry, and they've been a part of successful programs and successful athletes in their own right. So, they're coming into that too. So you're right. That coaching strength is so evident in the area. And again, going back to kind of North Clay and South Central, they just make you make plays because they are so fundamentally sound at the plate, in the field, and it all goes back to that fundamentals that these guys can continue, to play small ball, put pressure on you, whatever it takes to get that run in, they can do.
And doing that, fielding well, having good bat to ball skills, that all comes from playing a lot too. These are not kids. These are not kids that just play during the school season and then they don't play again until the next school season. I mean, first of all, having a fall season helps for all that too. But then it's just that culture, right? That you play as much baseball as you can, and that's what a lot of, especially programs where they only have spring ball, that's what they're up against, is that kids are on the baseball diamond for them for 3 or maybe 4 months out of the year tops. Whereas some of these kids that play in the NTC schools, especially, I mean, they live on the baseball diamond, right? Like and some of them are even seeking out, other travel opportunities in the summer, and, maybe even the occasional kid finding, some place to play indoors in the winter. Like
Yeah.
that's the only way you get that good, right? That you have those instincts on the baseball diamond.
I'll give you a little personal example. I mean, you mentioned Mason, playing at Altamont. We were at a White Sox game, as a matter of fact, past summer, and they flashed a stat on the scoreboard, and it said he's had, I don't know, this batter has only struck out 10 times in 330 plate appearances or whatever. And for whatever, the plate appearances stuck out to me. And so I went back and added up the fall season, his summer season that he played on, and then the spring season. So basically equivalent to a Major League Baseball, schedule, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And Mason had, I think it was just over or just under 300 at bats in that time frame, which, a Major League hitter can get 500, maybe a little over during a season.
Yep. Yeah.
And Mason is not unique in that stance. That's my point. These kids are all doing that, where, like you say, most spring programs, even if they play summer or fall, they play in the summer and spring in high school, teams that don't have the fall schedule that we do in this area, they're missing out on roughly 100 at bats.
Yep.
And that adds up in a hurry.
Yeah, it's a big thing, and it's hard to square that, because most of these kids want to play other sports, and it's smaller schools.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, for those programs to succeed. It's just it's a matter of want to. It's a matter of, does it mean enough, and that's a hard thing to sell, especially these days. Kids kind of tend to specialize a little bit more, but.
And I will be the first to say, I do not want, kids to specialize in one sport at the high school age. That is not my ideal. I mean, everybody can do whatever they want, and that's fine. But I mean, I like to see them play at least multiple sports. If you want to focus on one, great, that's fine. But especially in our area, you need your good athletes to be on the basketball court, to be on the baseball field. Or to be running track, or all three. It's just whatever they find to do. It's good for their body to, develop other muscles, and it can be good for their mentality as well. Yeah. Give them a break from the main sport, but also, you're not going to be as good at one as the other, and there's lessons to learn there as well.
And I know you don't want me to do this, but I'll bring Mason back into this again. I mean, obviously baseball is the sport that he's known for a while, was going to be what he plays past high school. But yet, I mean, you look at the Altamont basketball season, and he was a very important part of that team. Things are tougher for them if he's not out there, but he didn't. He made sure to commit the time to that too, and that helped to that team's success. And you gotta have that from all the kids, in order for these small school programs to do what they can, and for all the kids in all the sports to get the most out of them that they can.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if you pulled Brock Fearday off of the St. Anthony basketball team, or vice versa, off of the baseball team. Yeah. Where would they be? And the same for Aiden Dodson and Logan Fleener and, all these kids. So, I mean, I'm kind of going off on a tangent there with specializing and not specializing. But, I just like to see the kids out there competing and learning. And, and the interesting thing about these times is these kids, they all communicate with each other so easily. That's a very different thing than what happened. I mean, I was not an athlete that anybody would necessarily want to communicate with back in high school, but these kids, they have Snapchats and whatever with kids from all over the area, and that's kind of an interesting aspect too.
Yep. And sometimes, during the summer or during the travel season, they'll even, some of them will play together, even from being, different
sure.
like that, which that's always kind of been a thing, but I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
probably a little more commonplace now.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Altamont and St. Anthony, if they do meet up, there's 5 kids, I think, if I did the math right, that played with each other in a on a travel baseball team a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be Eli Levitt, Will Haney, and Connor Repke, and Jared Hammer and Mason Robinson. They all played together on a team, and Brock Fearday was there a lot because they played with his older brother.
Right.
But Brock didn't play with them, but he was sure there. So they all know each other and get along, but they compete like brothers on the field or on the court too.
So we've talked about the South Central Regional. We've talked about the Brownstown Regional. They will not play each other. The winner of the Brownstown Regional, which is the one that St. Anthony and Altamont are in, they play the winner of the Neoga Regional.
Right.
And I feel like that Neoga Regional is kind of up for grabs a little bit. Like I
do too.
It doesn't feel like there's any clear favorite in there. Okaw Valley's got the top seeding of the bunch, but they're the only one with a winning record, and it's not like, I mean, it's hovering around 500. So it feels like you got Central A&M, you got Casey, Martinsville, Cumberland, then of course Okaw Valley and Neoga have their spots set in the semifinals already. It just feels like there's not that could go any number of ways, and it wouldn't really surprise me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okaw Valley came out of that last year, if I recall, and was in the sectional, and they have some experience there. But I always tend to favor an NTC team, and Neoga is, like you said, already in the semifinal. They're going to get either Cumberland or Martinsville, most likely Cumberland, who's a nice team too.
Mm-hmm.
But if Neoga comes out of there with their strength of schedule, playing the teams that they've played, it wouldn't shock me at all. I think that's another coach that's trying to do his best. And by the way, kudos to Neoga. We went over there and played, and they have worked very hard on improving that diamond and the field and the area. And Kirk Hacker and the administration over there has done a great job. And I'm glad to see they're hosting that regional because it's a nice place to play. They deserve it. They put effort into it. And it's a small field, but it's the same field for everybody.
And it wasn't always, I mean, that's the one I played on. And it's the same location. They've just done a lot of work with it. I mean, even when Ted Kerner was there, he did a lot with the field just to make sure that rainouts weren't such a problem, because it's in a bad spot. And I mean, like my senior year, we didn't play a home game because it was a wet spring. I mean, literally 0 home games.
Wow.
But then Ted got it to where, it was a good playable field. And then Kirk, because that's something he's very good at, he has taken it to a new level. And yeah, you never would have thought 20 years ago that Neoga would be hosting a baseball regional, but yeah, that's nice. I mean, it's just a great thing to not have to go figure out.
Oh, sure.
Get on a bus, get out of school early, get out of your routine a little bit. That counts for a little bit. I always wonder how much, how tangible that is, but it's something, and it's nice just to not have to go anywhere. So we'll see how it shakes out. They played a lot of games too. That's the other thing. Neoga's played, I think I saw they were maybe 12 and 15.
20.
Yeah.
12 and 15, 12 and 16, something like that. They've almost played 30 games, and that's a lot considering the weather situation that's developed throughout the season, and that can only help them too. Get themselves prepared.
A lot of it, again, a lot of reps on the diamond. They might not always go your way as far as those games are concerned, but still playing them and being in situations, you never know when that will serve you well in a key postseason spot. And then, of course, the winner of the Tuscola Regional will play the winner of the South Central Regional. The only local team that we are sending up to Tuscola is the top seed there. Stu Straws, Winchester Straws got they were the top seed on their half of the sectional, and that's the thing. That's about where my intelligent speech on that regional ends, because you got Tuscola, Tri-County, Arcola, Macon, Meridian. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to.
Yeah, I can't speak intelligently on those teams either. So, I mean, other than to say, Coach Brett Harmeyer has done a really good job with his Stewartson club. I've got them with a record of 16-5 or somewhere thereabouts.
Yep.
They've lost to St. Anthony. They lost a tough game to Altamont. And I remember they lost to South Central. So, I mean, there's 3 of their 5 losses right there that's come against obviously teams that we know that are very good and competitive. So I like their chances to advance out of that. It wouldn't surprise me to see 3 or 4 teams from the National Trail in the Altamont sectional when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could. I mean, you can see Windsor Stew Straws winning out of Tuscola. I mean, it's a pretty fair bet that you're going to get either North Clay or South Central out of the South Central Regional. Pretty fair bet that you're going to get either St. Anthony or Altamont out of Brownstown. And then, yeah, that Neoga Regional, a little bit more of a toss-up, but Neoga certainly with the ability to do it. That'd be very cool to have 4 NTC teams go over to Altamont.
It'd be fun.
And play in that sectional. I would sign off on that. If anybody gave me any sort of control over the deal, I would say, yeah, that's fine by me. Go for it.
And I mean, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of summing up the 1A sectional, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. But again, those teams definitely are the favorites that we've mentioned, but you better be careful, because there's teams out there with pitchers that can beat you on any given night,
right?
From these other teams. It's the high tide has raised so many ships in this area, and I mean, you better be ready to play each and every night of postseason, or else you will be sent home. Doesn't matter who you are, a top seed or a mid seed or a bottom seed. Be ready. It'll be fun.
It takes 2 pretty good pitchers, I think, to make a run, but it only takes 1. Depending on how you deploy that pitcher to be a spoiler. And coaches have different philosophies about how to do that. Some of them will say, well, I can't win a regional unless I save so-and-so for that championship game. But then there's the other side, which is that, well, I can't win a championship if I don't get to the championship. So that's the inner monologue for all the coaches out there. But that's where some of the teams that we've mentioned, they don't have to necessarily make that Sophie's choice on their pitching. They can kind of, that's pitching depth is another strength for these teams we've mentioned. I mean, I know Altamont's got a lot of kids that they can go to in a big game. St. Anthony has a lot of kids they feel comfortable going to in a big spot. That's a nice luxury to have.
Yeah, I mean, South Central, from what I've seen and heard, I mean, you've got Dodson, you've got Bonera, you've got Watwood, who has closed out some games when those kids have run out of pitches. So they're in good shape. North Clay, Alex Booz pitches a lot. Jones's brothers pitch for them. So they've got depth there. Carter Walden, that young freshman, like you say, St. Anthony with Levitt and Fearday, but Jansen is coming along and pitched well. They've got some other kids that they can throw in there. And Altamont, I will say Altamont has maybe the most depth at pitching. They've had a couple injuries that's hampered them, but still, they've got 4 or 5 kids that they would have no problem throwing into almost any situation, as far as saying that this is where we're going to go. So, yeah, I mean, all those teams and pitching wins a lot of games, pitching and defense. Still got to remember that, even though we see these teams put up a lot of offensive numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I could, like a St. Anthony, for instance. I could certainly see them putting up big run totals, but I also just think they're the pitching solid enough that if they found themselves in a tight game, like they're not going to be if there's a pitcher, if they happen to run into a pitcher that's got their number, they're still going to be competitive because of those kids you mentioned. But Altamont's the same way, a talented roster. So I, I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to some of those potential championship matchups. And the only problem is that you can only really make it to one of them.
Only get to one.
Yeah.
Altamont, that Brownstown one starts at 10 in the regional championship, which will be the 20th. And all the other games starts at 11. So you're going to have to make your choice on where you want to be with the Brownstown Regional, South Central Regional, Tuscola Regional, and Neoga Regional. But some good baseball coming up on that Wednesday night and Saturday at Altamont in that sectional championship, no matter who is in those games.
Absolutely. So, the 1A regionals that we just mentioned, I think that's a bulk of this conversation, just because of the chances for whoever happens to emerge from all that in sectionals in 2 or 3 weeks, like being able to make a run. But that's not all there is.
No.
2A baseball, Teutopolis is in kind of unfamiliar territory. T-Town is going into the Greenville Regional, which 1A and 2A regionals start at the same time on Monday the 15th. And T-Town's going to have to play. They're going to have to play a quarterfinal game, which is something that it's not a place they found themselves very often. They're playing a Vandalia team that struggles, and they probably ought to be able to advance, but then they're going to have to play Flora. And what I've seen out of T-Town, the times I've seen them, which is admittedly not a lot, like they just putting runs on the board has been a little tougher this year than it has been in years past.
Yeah, it's kind of I've seen them a few times. Again, I haven't seen a large sample size, but for whatever reason, it just kind of seems like they just haven't put it together to where, they pitch okay one day, but then the offense isn't there, and then the offense is there, but then the pitching isn't there, and it's just kind of been one of those funny baseball seasons for Teutopolis in the sense of, that they just can't find a way to get it all put together as often as we're used to. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're playing against kind of their own legacy, I guess, in a sense. And I mean, they're not bad.
No.
But they're gonna be playing a Vandalia team that's 12-12. I actually saw them once, and they've got some pieces and athletes too over at Vandalia. So you would think you like T-Town's chances to get out of that game on Monday, but Flora, they're apparently a pretty solid club and the real deal this year as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Teutopolis does, and I will never ever count out a Teutopolis team. I can promise you that.
Well, you mentioned T-Town playing against some legacy, and that goes into the schedule they play.
Sure.
I mean, just as a for instance, this weekend they played 3 games over Friday, Saturday. They played Highland, they played Chatham Glenwood, and they played Edwardsville. Okay, I mean, they're 11-13, and they lost 2 out of those 3 games, but their schedule is their schedule, and it doesn't. There's up years and down years as far as talent goes, but that's what they do, right? There's not a lot, there's no cupcakes on there. I look at the losses. No. I look at the losses to Effingham, to Newton, to South Central, to Nashville, Mount Zion, St. Anthony, Charleston. I mean, look at those and tell me what are the bad losses. Muhammad, right? What are the bad losses there? There's nothing there that's oh my goodness, they really blew it there.
Yeah, and we talk about how good North Clay is, and they defeated North Clay, 5-2, and that was pretty recently, and they're actually scheduled to play Altamont tomorrow night. Now I don't, and the other thing is you never know. Like you mentioned, they played 3 games this weekend, so they've probably used up a lot of their pitching, and now they're going to go up against Altamont on Monday, and they might not have, who they would really like to throw available.
Oh, sure.
And that's all part of it too.
Yes.
So, T-Town's still T-Town.
Yeah.
And it might not be the year that we are used to from the Wooden Shoes, but if you're Flora, are you excited to see T-Town in your semifinal matchup there at Greenville on that Wednesday the 17th?
No.
I mean, I would never be excited to see T-Town on the schedule, in a game that I have to win.
You raised a good point. People and I think people who follow baseball should understand this, but it always bears repeating. Like, you can't look at any single matchup and just look at the score and tell me and know everything you need to know about those two teams, right? Like, it's not basketball, football, pretty much any other sport. Like, your team is your team, right? You might be dealing with an injury here or there, or it's like personnel that's not available for any sort of reason. But baseball is so matchup oriented that two teams could play each other, and one day one team might smoke the other one, and then the other day the other team might win in similarly convincing fashion, just because of which pitcher was available to which team win, right? Like, it's so
yeah, you're going to tell me that St. Anthony's really 20 runs better than North Clay City in that 24-4 game that we saw, come across there at North Clay. I mean, the wind was howling out that day, and it's baseball. That's the other thing too. The element of it's baseball jumps in there quite a bit.
Sure. Yep. So anyway, we make the point, don't count T-Town out. And Newton is kind of fringy, like what Mike and I usually spend much time talking about, but Newton's got a #1 seed and they're hosting their own regional. They're in that same sectional that T-Town is, that's feeding Breeze Central. Newton's pretty good.
Newton is really good. Saw them play early, put up a lot of runs against Altamont. That game ended 14-13, if I remember right. But it was like literally maybe the second game of the season for those two teams. But no, they are really good. They've got a good lineup, good pitching. Matter of fact, Altamont's going to play them again before the season's out if the weather holds. So, it's so I might have a look at them again, but still, I like their chances. They are a very good ball club, and Salem also a 3 seed in that whole area is a pretty solid team as well. So, there's lots of good baseball at the 2A level as well. And T-Town, if they would get past Flora, would still have to play Salem or Greenville. And, it's not going to be an easy road for the Shoes, but I still, like I said, wouldn't bet against them.
Now, Matt, you told me that you haven't been able to catch a single softball game this year at the high school.
Not live, not in person, no.
So I don't expect you to I'm not going to be leaning on you real heavily here, other than you're familiar with the programs, and so there's some things to say, but the for us, as far as, and I'll just stay with 2A and shift over to softball real quick, because St. Anthony and T-Town are actually in the same regional. T-Town is and St. Anthony's got a 1 seed on that side of the sectional. St. Anthony hasn't been able to play much. They're 15-3.
Yeah.
But they're good. I mean, listen, they're very good.
They couldn't get a game in early at all.
Right. They really, they were up against the weather big time. Even when some teams were able to get a few games played, they would just, and especially on Saturdays, it felt like every Saturday they were supposed to go play a tournament. They get weathered out. Even they had a Grand Tool that was on an all-weather surface where you think, of course, we'll play, but lightning kept that from getting played. It was just so there they are, but they're good hitters up and down the lineup. I know, I talked to Lucy Fearday a little bit on Saturday because my daughter had a pitching and hitting lesson, and she was talking about this Payne Paris matchup that they'll face the winner of. in the semifinals, and she said, Paris is pretty good. Like Paris is not.
Mm-hmm.
Paris wins that, they're not going to be any sort of easy team to deal with. But T-Town's a 7 seed on that half of the sectional. T-Town's got a winning record and I think playing better as of late. I saw them play against St. Anthony a week and a half ago, and St. Anthony got the better of them, but I definitely saw where T-Town's got pieces. The pitching's not bad. So we'll see about that. But St. Anthony having to be 2A, it's been it's quite a challenge, quite a step up in what you have to face when you make that 1A to 2A jump. They saw that last year and still advanced to the sectional level, I believe. But
yes,
but you get into those sectionals and boy, it's tough in a hurry.
They actually ended up playing against Bloomington Central Catholic, and I have a niece that plays for Bloomington Central Catholic. So I got a little insight on them and their schedule and that sort of thing. I mean, they've got a really nice pitcher, and that's where it always starts, and especially in softball, because that pitcher can throw every game for you if that's what the coach desires, as long as they're healthy, and usually they can stay healthy with that arm motion. Yeah, I mean, St. Anthony, of course, moved up to the 2A level because of their success at the state tournament a couple years ago, and they'll be up there for a couple more years, being a private school with the way it works. They got bumped up, and so that's, if anybody was curious why their boys were 1A and the girls are 2A, that's the reason. And Teutopolis, again, we get into teams because of the 2A and how it's spread out that we just are less familiar with. Like, I can't tell you one thing about Westville, and that's who the Shoes are going to be playing at Teutopolis. So the biggest advantage St. Anthony and T-Town has is the fact that they don't really have to travel in their regional, at least. So
I saw
that'll be nice for them.
Westville's got a pretty solid record. They're 21-5. So, I would imagine that they're going to be quite a challenge. I mean, you'd love to see a St. Anthony T-Town championship game there, but they'll have their work to do. And you mentioned Central Catholic. That's they're hosting a regional. They're in there. They're not even the top seed in that regional normally.
No.
But whoever comes out of that, that's who the winner of this Teutopolis regional would play at the Tolono Unity sectional. And speaking of the Tolono Unity sectional, well, Tolono Unity's got a really solid team. And they were at state last year, and they appeared to pretty much have the core of that team back. They're a number 1 seed. They're going to go to Maroa and play in that regional. So they're looming. If you get too much further past your regional, you're going to have to deal with them at some point. It's just again, 2A is just it's a minefield from the start. It's a very difficult road to hoe, but that's the price to pay for success, right? You make that state, and this is what you get. But that St. Anthony's got so many kids back from that team that went to state. I mean, there's a ton of talent there, ton of talent.
And we might find out a little bit by paying attention to the scores from softball, because St. Anthony is going to play Maroa on Monday. And Maroa is on the other side of that sectional. They're a 4 seed, or they're a 5 seed taking on Warrensburg Latham. So, depending on how St. Anthony does against Maroa, if they would advance and take on Tolono, that might give you a little bit of an idea of what you're looking at. But again, sports are sports, and they go the way they go one day and maybe a different way the next. So,
I mentioned Lucy, and I feel like I need to clarify this in a couple different places, because I had mentioned when they were playing T-Town, when St. Anthony and T-Town were playing softball on a Friday night on the radio week and a half ago, I mentioned that she was going to go play softball at Lakeland, which once upon a time was the plan. But she decided that she was going to go play basketball at Parkland, which, first of all, to have those options, to just be like, to be able to pick and choose which of those two things you want to do, that kind of speaks to what kind of an athlete we're talking about. You look at that St. Anthony team, and the older Rios girl, Cameron, she's going to go play softball at UIC, which, I mean, I don't care if it's like name brand college softball or what, it's still, that's a big, you're going to be facing top notch competition up there. That's very
absolutely.
The Hatton girl is already going to go to Eastern. That's a program that's like, they're in a strong point in their existence too. So like the fact that they've already decided they want her, that speaks highly of her. She bats 8th, by the way, for St. Anthony. She's 8 hitter. Hit a home run. Hit a home run.
And she's going to Yeah, and she's going to play D1 softball. And a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I do have a tie to the coaching staff there at Eastern that I know them. Good people. And so that's going to be a fun experience for her there at Eastern as well, with Coach Archibald and Coach Ring.
Yeah, and by the way, Emily Conkle also going to go play at Eastern.
Yeah.
So, there's, and I'm sure I'm some St. Anthony kids here, but the fact of the matter is they've got a really good roster, and we'll see. I mean, if they were still a 1A team with this group of kids together, they'd be a heavy favorite to make it up to Peoria. So
yeah, and that's nothing against the 1A teams in our area, who's very good as well. But yeah, you would definitely have to say that. And then just kind of kicking back, to Totopolis, kind of looking at things, they're scheduled to play Paris in softball too on Monday. So that'll, like I say, give us a little bit of an idea of what we could be setting up for that regional as well.
I'll bet you that somebody closely associated to the St. Anthony program is probably going to try and take that game in and get a little scouting done. That would be my guess. They probably want to get a look.
Well, St. Anthony's going to be at Maroa at 4:30, and that Totopolis at Paris game, at least according to the schedule at 97.9 XFM and KJCountry.com, is at 6:15.
Okay. I don't know. It'd be tricky, but not impossible.
No. So
of course,
just something to think about. Like
it has to not rain all day first. That's the biggest
problem. Yeah, I haven't looked at a forecast in the last 10 minutes, so it might have changed on me again.
Well, it's City Series week, Matt, so you know what that means.
Very true.
We'll touch on that in a second. 1A softball real quick. As far as 1A local teams that are poised to make a run, I think probably the one you really have to talk about is, like feeling pretty good about a sectional is South Central.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. They're hosting a regional and they're hosting a sectional.
Yep. Yeah, and they're a number 1 seed in their sectional, in their half of the sectional. I saw them play St. Anthony in the NTC title game, and they played St. Anthony even after the first couple innings. St. Anthony put a bunch of runs on the board in the first and second innings and ended up winning 7-1. But you could tell that South Central is a good team, and they're young too. So whatever they do this year, they're going to build on it next year because they're only graduating.
Sure.
A couple of players that are, heavy contributors to what they're doing now. But yeah, I mean, this is a South Central team that they beat Casey earlier this year. They're sitting on 19 wins. Casey's the other number 1 seed in sectional. So there's a chance that they could get a look at each other again. And we talked about already the mild advantage of hosting a sectional, not having to travel. That could certainly help South Central out. But if you get into those games, I mean, you already know that you are capable of beating what is probably considered the best team in your sectional. You can do it.
Yeah.
That's got to be a little bit of a weight off. No, and that's, we can talk about that in generic terms. It doesn't matter what teams we're talking about. If you've done it, then you can do it again.
Absolutely. And you look at it, South Central, they know that they can beat Casey, and obviously in softball, my guess is the number one pitchers through each for each team in that game, and those will probably be the ones you see again. I mean, who knows for sure? I can't say that for sure, but odds are that's what happens. So, Casey obviously such a traditional power in softball, just like Cumberland is, and Cumberland's in the Hudsonville regional with Windsor Stew Straws, and you talk about the advantage of South Central staying home through the regional and sectional should they continue to advance. Well, Windsor Stew Straws is going to have to hit the road to play at Hudsonville in the regional, and then if they would advance out of that, they would be at South Central as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's quite a haul. Cumberland at least makes that trip on a more regular basis.
Yep.
I don't know how much that matters, but at least they know what they're in for when they climb on the bus, right?
I guess, yeah.
But you look at it, Windsor Stew Straws got to pull the 2 seed, Cumberland got the 3, but other than that, you kind of look, and as far as teams you expect to make any noise, that's South Central is really the South Central, Windsor Stew Straws, perhaps those are the ones that you kind of look at and say they could play in a sectional. That's kind of sounds feasible to me, but who knows? I don't want to sell anybody short. I really just don't know as much.
No, I just know scores that I hear and that sort of stuff. Casey Westfield obviously coming out of the Casey sectional, that wouldn't surprise you at all. The Dietrich's in there. They have to play Okaw Valley in their first game at a semifinal at KZ, and then Altamont, I guess, is hosting the other regional, and the strength there is Edwards County. They would be the high seed in that one. Altamont drew the 3 out of there, but they play Clay City's co-op in their first game. St. Elmo Brownstown has to take on Albion. So, those are just semifinals straight away on Tuesday and Wednesday to see who plays Saturday in that regional championship.
Yep. All right. I teased it, and I want to get you off of here because I promised you like 45 minutes, and we're already over that. You've got baccalaureate tonight because to go to for Mason. But I brought up the City Series. That is this week. It's supposed to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you're listening to this or watching this, I think you probably know how it works already, but St. Anthony and Effingham playing against each other for baseball and softball. Softball games each of those days in the afternoon, baseball games each of those days in the evening. And it's a lot of fun. It's so neat, even just from the broadcaster's perspective, to be a part of it. I can't imagine what it's like to play in it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that too. It would have been such a fun thing to be a part of. I can't even imagine as, you're looking at the schedule, and that has to be just the highlight of the schedule every year for those two schools in a sense. And, jumping ahead to the Saturday after, Effingham has always traditionally had to play a conference doubleheader right after that City Series. But on the schedule this time, that's not there. And that might have been the way it is for the last couple of years. And so that kind of frees up, say, Effingham a little bit, as they had been hamstring with pitching concerns in that. But it looks like both teams will be all out to win it, and that should be fun, to say the least.
And the other thing that Effingham has going for it, they already, and there are Apollo games happening that Saturday, but Effingham is done. And also they drew Taylorville this past weekend. They had their Apollo doubleheader with Taylorville. Taylorville didn't win a conference game. Effingham beat them 12-2 and 11-0. I know the 11-0 was a 5-inning game because I happened to be at Community Park when it was wrapping up. I assume the 12-2 game probably was short too. So you won those games handily, didn't have to lean on your top 2 pitchers as much as you might normally on a Saturday. So their availability for the end of the week. Yeah, it could set up pretty well because you're right. Normally Effingham kind of has to they have those conference concerns. St. Anthony does not have to worry about that stuff in the spring. And that's an advantage to St. Anthony in a year where St. Anthony's already got a really good team. So you just give them one extra card to play, the fact that they can line their pitching up exactly the way they want. But I do think that lends to some pretty interesting baseball matchups, because you've got that St. Anthony lineup going against Devitt Kid, who has beaten some of the best teams that Effingham has played this year. And, Effingham's top 2 pitchers have had a good spring. So who knows? Those are going to be fun games to pay attention to.
Yeah, it really should be an interesting week. And just taking a quick glance at the schedules now, some of these teams, both Effingham and St. Anthony could have added a game, but I don't see them on the schedule for Monday or Tuesday. And that's not a shock, because like you say, you're trying to get ready for that city series for both of those teams. I don't blame them at all. Because boy, it's good competition for both of them, getting themselves set up for postseason. And that's what a lot of these teams in the area are really doing, is they are ramping themselves up to get ready for the postseason and make sure their pitching gets in line and that sort of stuff. So it's going to be an interesting last couple of weeks here for high school baseball and softball.
And the softball should be fun too, because again, we've talked about how good St. Anthony's girls are. Effingham's having a good softball season too. They are putting runs on the board.
Yes,
they had to lean on a freshman pitcher, which occasionally leads to giving up a few, just because it's not easy to just be 14 years old, 15 years old, and pitch a 3A schedule. But I've got them at 16-8. They finished second in the Apollo Conference. Jerry Triggs got a team that's playing well, and again, they score runs. They've scored 214 runs they've scored. So you do the math in 24 games, that's probably about 9, if maybe a little less. That's they'll give St. Anthony everything they want and put some runs on the board and make those games battles. So I'll be looking forward to seeing them too.
Yeah, those games could take a little while if they put up some runs like that, which is always convenient for us trying to get from game to game, but we'll make do.
Yeah, there have been a couple of frantic trips across town for me in the past. I know that much, but
sure.
But I always like to think that if it really came down to it, and we told them at the baseball game that we need 5 more minutes, they'd probably do it for us. I don't know if we've ever had the audacity to ask, but I think it's probably on the table. I'm not sure about that one, so we'll see.
No, it is such a fun, unique event, and the softball games are at 4:00, baseball games at 7:00 throughout the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday and Thursday looking pretty good as far as rain. Friday forecast includes a chance of it, so we'll have to see.
They'll do everything they can to get them played.
Yeah.
They'll if it's really looking bad, they might do a doubleheader somewhere in there to get them in. They really want them to happen. Everybody's behind it. You got a lot of people behind the scenes that work hard to make sure it's a good experience for the kids that are getting to participate this year, because 20 years from now, they'll remember it. They'll still talk about it. And I've seen evidence of that. I see people all the time who still remember when they played in it and have stories about it. It sticks with them forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you say, it's fun to be a small part of it, like we get to be with the broadcast. And I'm looking forward to doing a game or two, and I think you should look forward to doing a game or two as well.
I kind of figured that was part of the plans, but we'll get it straightened out here in the next day or two. So, Matt, I've taken an hour of your time. You got things to do.
Oh, that's no problem.
The Cardinals are, I know, not worth really talking about, so we don't have to.
Hey, they just won. They just finished up with a 12-6 victory.
I saw did Goldschmidt hit 2 home runs today?
He at least hit 2. I thought maybe he had a third one. I'm not sure.
So that's all they need. I mean, that's a simple formula. You just get Goldschmidt to hit a couple of home runs and you'll win a ball game. He hit 3 home runs.
He did get 3. Okay, that's what I was thinking. I kind of looked up and they were showing highlights and yeah, I mean, you get Contreras out from behind the plate, and I don't understand this at all, but that's okay.
Well, you just got to do whatever you can to make sure that Andrew Kinsner is getting more at bats.
Well, all I'm saying is they scored 12 runs when Kisner was in the lineup.
Okay, well, I can't argue with that. I can't argue.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. So.
Well, Matt, thanks. Appreciate you taking the time. Mike, I'm sure Mike will be watching this, and hopefully everything gets better.
Yeah.
It's just been a rough patch, and he's putting his priorities where he needs to. But hopefully everybody in the house gets to feeling better, and back on a normal, back to a normal life.
That would be wonderful news to hear. We wish Mike and Ann the best there, and like I say, hope everything turns out well in the end.
And probably Morgan too. I'm guessing Morgan's getting.
She might be a little stressed.
Yeah. So good. Hopefully the Wilsons get back on solid footing soon. So thanks again, Matt, and
my pleasure.
We'll have to do this again sometime. Okay.
All righty. Thanks, Dustin.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later.